Hi, everybody. We're going to get started in about 1 minute, so stay tuned. All right, we're going to get started. Hopefully everybody can hear me. This is Chrissy with the Pongos Learning Lab and Pongos Interactive. I'm going to be talking today. Sorry, 1 second. Hopefully everybody can hear me. This is Chrissy. Sorry, I had to mute the other screen. So we are going to talk today about building an app for your business. Doesn't matter if you have a business, nonprofit, an event, a product or a service or anything like that. We're going to show you how to build it without having to be a programmer. If you have questions, if you're watching this through YouTube, you should be able to ask on the comments and the questions on the screen. Otherwise, you can send me an email. For those of you that pre-registered, I sent you an email last night with the instructions for asking questions. If you have any technical issues, you can't hear me, please do make a comment of that in the chat so I can see it. and I will try to address it as quickly as possible. But otherwise, I'm just going to keep going through, and I'll check every once in a while for questions if anybody has them. Excuse me. Let me hide that so that we don't see it the whole time. All right, so first thing, do you even need an app? This is a big question that we get pretty frequently. Every once in a while, we'll get a customer that comes to us and says, I need an app. And they think they need an app, and after we speak with them, they realize maybe they don't need an app after all. So that's the first thing that I do want to address is, do you even need an app? So there is a very good chance that yes, you do need an app. If you think you need an app, you probably do, but let's first make sure that your website is mobile ready before we even get to the point of discussing an app. So when I say that I want to make sure that your website is mobile ready, you want to make sure that it is responsive. And responsive means that no matter what screen is looking at your website, it's going to look good. You're not going to have to be scrolling in, pinching the screen if you're on a tablet or a phone. I know a lot of folks still have websites where you go to look at it on the desktop and it looks beautiful, and then you go and look at it on a tablet or a small smartphone, and you have to kind of scroll in. You have to move things around so you can see all the content. Sometimes it's practically impossible to even use the navigation. So we just want to make sure before you even consider an app that your website is ready to go for mobile users. Because there's a good chance that even if you do have an app, some of your users are not going to use it, and you're going to need to use the website instead. If you're not sure if your website's responsive, you can take a look at it on your cell phone or a tablet, or you can use a service like Browser Stack. They have some free and they have some paid. They have a free trial and they have some paid packages that you can use to check your website and make sure it looks really good on a variety of devices. So that's really important to do. Another thing that you want to make sure before you even consider an app is make sure that your site is secure. So this, in combination with having your website be responsive, is actually extremely important these days, especially if you're concerned about search engine optimization or SEO. If your website is not secure, so if you don't see that nice little HTTPS, or you get that green secure or the lock icon, depends on the browser how this looks. I believe this is Chrome. This screenshot is Chrome on a Mac. So if the user is not seeing the site as secure, then they may not want to stay at the site. And depending on the browser they're using, if you have issues with the SSL on your site, then there's a really good chance that the browser is only going to display part of it. It may not display it at all. It may post warning messages. So you do want to make sure that your site is secure in addition to being responsive. It is, again, also important for search engine optimization. Google will actually ding you and will give you lower search engine results if your site does not have SSL and is not responsive or doesn't have a mobile view for mobile users, because mobile website is pretty important these days. Most users are actually looking at your website on their mobile device, so you want to make sure that it will work properly on that. If you don't have SSL, you can check with your web hosting provider. If they want to charge you an arm and a leg for it, which they used to, you might want to look into something like Let's Encrypt, or look for a web hosting provider that will give you a free SSL certificate through Let's Encrypt. It's totally free through Let's Encrypt, because I really want everybody to have a secure site. So if you've checked all of those things and yes, your site is responsive, yes, you have SSL, then I really want you to think, do you really need an app? You might be totally fine with just a mobile ready website. Might be perfectly acceptable to have that. And some of the reasons, and it says here 4 reasons, it can be pretty expensive to build and maintain an app. It really can be. I'm going to show you some ways that you can keep the cost down, but it can be very expensive to build that app, especially if you're hiring a programmer to do it. And it can also be relatively expensive to maintain it. Even if you're using some of the tools that I'm going to show you later, it can still be relatively expensive to keep that app updated. There's somewhere has to be hosted somewhere. So it's not free to create an app. It's not free to create a website, as many of you already know. So you will have to take those costs into account. If your website is already responsive and secure and it already works on any device, then that might be sufficient. Okay, but an app might be a better choice in some cases. So some of the top reasons that I hear from customers that they need an app or they want an app, number one is they don't want people to have to remember their URL for their website. That's a totally valid reason. They don't want people to have to remember. Maybe the domain name is really long, or maybe it's just not really easy to remember. When that comes up, then I usually say try to come up with a more memorable domain name. But if that's the main reason for it, then that may not be the best reason. Another reason that you might want to have an app is because of the interactivity and gaming factor. And you can totally do a website that has interactivity and gaming. Some of you already know this. I used to be a Flash developer. So I used to build interactive games. I used to build interactive elements for websites. And that was done with a program that used to be called Adobe Flash, or actually, sorry, it used to be called Macromedia Flash way back in the day. And now it's called Adobe Animate. But you can get that kind of interactivity and gaming element on your site with something like HTML5. That does require a programmer to do, but that is something that you might want to consider having an app for, because sometimes it's just easier to build it as an app than it is to build it into the website. Another really important reason might be if you want to use some location-based functionality using the user's GPS on their phone. You can get some of that functionality in a website as well, especially a progressive web app, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But some of it is a little easier to implement and a little bit more meaningful to your users if it's done through a mobile app. So for example, using things like loyalty, rewards, coupons that are based on the user actually being physically in your store. So if you have a brick and mortar storefront, then this location-based functionality might be extremely useful. Another really nice reason is if you want to take advantage of native features such as push notifications. So if you want to be able to send your users push notifications when there's a sale, or if they're in your using, again, going back to that location-based functionality, if they're within 50 miles of your store, you might want to let them know that there's a sale at your store in a specific location. Another really nice feature is there is native sharing within many mobile apps, and that makes it a little easier for some users to share the content. Another really big reason is if you want to have users use offline content. So if they're looking at your website and they lose their internet connection, then they lose access to your website. They won't be able to view your website. But in a mobile app, you can actually have some content that is visible offline. So if you cache that content when they first install the site or when they are connected to the internet, then they could use that offline content with your app. So that's a really useful reason. So going back again, maybe it's still not a good idea for an app. So I really want you to consider this before you put the time and effort into developing the app. So the first thing that I ask people is, have you ever installed an app? Why? Why did you want to install it? I know I have a kind of cruddy older Samsung Galaxy S6, and it is pretty full. The one that I got, it did not have expandable capacity. I can't put a memory card in there if I run out of space. I can't take all my pictures and put them on a memory card and put them somewhere else. So I will have to resort, if I want to take another video or I want to take some more pictures of my family, I might have to uninstall an app to do that. So I have sort of a running list in my mind of which apps do I want to uninstall. So which apps am I not using? So which apps do I not find important? Which apps are really not giving me any kind of value? And those are the first ones that I uninstall. So the big thing is you want to make sure that you are giving your users some sort of value for having that app and keeping that app installed, or their tablet or whatever they're using. So you want to make sure that when you're creating this app, you're putting features into it that are things that users can't otherwise get on your existing website, your social media, or anything like that. So if it can't add value, if the app doesn't add value to the user, then it might not be worth the cost of building it for you. All right, so maybe you've decided, okay, I want to add these specific features, and yes, it's going to be totally valuable to my customers. So I absolutely positively want to have an app. So how do you get started? Well, first, this is very important. You do need developer accounts. So you might think, well, wait a minute, I'm not a developer. Why do I need a developer account? Well, that's because that's the way the stores work. Apple wants to get paid. Google wants to get paid. They want to make sure that you have these developer accounts. So another thing that I want you to consider, and I'll talk about this again in just a minute, is you want the app to actually be published by you. So if this is your company's app, then the app by your company. It should not be published by a third party. It should be published by you. The Apple developer $4 a year. It's relatively easy to set up. And then the Google Play developer account is a $25 one-time fee. You don't ever have to pay it again unless they change their terms of service. But for right now, you're going to be paying $25 one time to Google and then $99 a year to Apple. And that's to create accounts. And you'll be able to use those developer accounts to submit your apps to the Apple and Google stores for distribution to your users. So for both accounts, you can actually assign the permission to use those accounts or to access those accounts to actual developers if you need help, but you still need to create the account for your company. All right, so this is part of why this is important. There's a couple of reasons this is important. Number one, again, it goes back to credibility. So if you were looking for the official Facebook app in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, and you saw an app that was developed by a company called MySpace or something like that, you probably wouldn't really want to install it, or at least you shouldn't if you're concerned about the security of your device. So it really does go to the credibility of your app. So it's only $124. I know that sounds like a lot, but when you consider how much money you're probably going to put into creating and maintaining this app, it's really just a small drop in the bucket. So it's a good idea to go ahead and get that app account, that developer account set up. Another thing is Apple actually requires that the app is submitted under the developer account of the app's content developer. So if you're the one that is publishing the content, then you're the one that needs to have the Apple developer account. This is a requirement. It's not new. It's been around. It's been a requirement for a while. And actually for a little while, Apple was for a short period of time was actually preventing some apps from being published because they were being published by a third party. So even though they were being published by the third party using an Apple developer account for the publishers under the publisher's name, they were still blocking them. So they will let you publish from the tools that I'm going to show you later on, even though those are third-party tools that are actually doing the publishing, as long as the account is in your name. So it's really important that you do that. So now that you've got, let's say that you went ahead and by the way, the underlying links here, when you get the slideshow, for those of you that are registered for the class, you'll get a PDF copy of the slideshow. You will be able to go and click on those links, and we'll actually take a look at them a little bit later. So hold on for that. All right, so now it's time to build your app. So you have some options. One of your options is you can learn Swift and or Objective-C if you want to build iOS apps. Those are programming languages. You can also learn Java and or C++ if you want to build Android apps. So notice that, excuse me, if you wanted to build an iOS app and an Android app, and it's the same app for each platform, you have to actually build with different languages. So you couldn't just write it all in one language and then publish it to both. You'd have to learn both of those languages. And then if you also want to build a Windows app, which some people do, some people publish specifically for Windows, you'd also have to add C# to your language list. So you're at this point, if you're publishing for 3 platforms, you're learning at least 3 languages. So that is a little bit of work to have to do. It's probably also a good idea while you're at it to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So now we're up to 6 languages. I hope some of you are multilingual. If you don't already know those languages, that's okay. You can learn them. They're not that hard. So those 3 languages, those last 3, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, are the languages that we use to build websites, at least the front end of a website. And in some cases, you can use tools that will build web apps using those languages. Problem with all of these is that this does require you to either already be or become a programmer. So if you don't want to become a programmer, that's okay. You don't have to. Remember, if you read the description for this, it specifically said you don't have to be a programmer because I do have alternatives. If you don't want to have to learn 1, 2, 3, or 6 languages, don't worry. Another option, so if you don't want to be you don't want to become a programmer, I get it. You can hire a programmer. So this is an option, but it's not an inexpensive one. So if you're hiring someone that knows 1, 3, 5, 6 languages, they're not going to be cheap. You are going to have to pay a decent hourly rate to them. You could always go offshore if you wanted to. I've had a few experiences with offshore developers. Some of them have been amazing experiences. Some of them haven't. So, you know, you're kind of, if you find a really good developer, you're in luck. If not, then you've thrown a lot of money and not gotten anything out of it. One thing to keep in mind is that if you are hiring an offshore developer, you may not be able to publish certain apps using offshore developers. So just something to keep in mind. This, again, it's not cheap. It's not inexpensive. I mean, it can be less expensive if you're using certain developers, or if you're getting your cousin to build it for you, or an intern or somebody like that. But it's not cheap. So, you know, if you're thinking this is going to be a good way to get it done, expect to pay a decent amount of money for it. It might be a little bit less expensive if you learn how to use a framework or an SDK, a software development kit, but it really depends on the app. Now, if you have a very custom app, or if you're trying to build a game or something like that with your app, then this might be the best. And in some cases, it might be the only option for you to follow. So after I show you some of these tools for non-developers to use a little bit later on, you might want to just kind of revisit and think, are those going to work for me, or do I need to actually pay a developer to build this app for me? So just something to keep in mind there. And the other thing I want you to keep in mind is that it doesn't take just code to build an app. I used to tell people I cannot design my way out of a paper bag. I can't draw a line unless the computer is helping me draw it, unless I'm coding the programmer to draw it for me. It's not just code that's going into your app. You also need designers. You need user testers. You need a user experience designer. You need a user interface designer. You need quality assurance. So there's more than just programming that's going into the app. So just something to keep in mind. It can get pretty expensive if you want to hire a company to build it for you. This is something that we do for our clients. We build apps using some of those programming languages that I mentioned earlier. And then we also build apps using some of the tools that I'm going to show you in a little bit. I will tell you it is a lot easier and a lot faster to use some of the tools I'm going to show you, but you don't get quite as much flexibility, and you can't make your app as custom as you might need it to be. So if you don't want to hire a programmer, I get it, then you can build your own app. So next thing I'm going to do is show you a bunch of tools that you can use as a non-developer to build your app. And there are lots of tools out there. You can use something called an app builder platform, or they call them different things depending on who you're asking, but it's an app builder program, platform, software as a service. But typically these are websites that have a service that is going to be to build that app for you. So some of the benefits with this, number one, you don't need a programmer, at least not to make the basics, at least to make a relatively nice, good content-driven app. You can make it so that it's a cross-platform app without knowing how to code, which is really nice. So if you remember back a few slides, I talked about you needed to know Swift and maybe Java, or maybe C# to create those 3 platform apps. In this, you don't need to know any of those languages. You can actually build apps for 2 or 3 platforms without knowing any programming at all, which is really nice. So most of these platforms that I'm going to show you, they do charge a monthly or an annual fee to host your app. So as long as you're paying that fee, they're going to keep your app hosted. It's going to be good to go. Just keep in mind, you do have to continue to pay that fee as long as you want the app to be available. I will mention towards the end a few alternatives to these apps. I did not put them in the slideshow because I really wanted the slideshow to sort of stick with the tools that are specifically for non-developers, but I will mention a few maybe intermediate level tools that you could use to build an app. You do still need to have those developer accounts for submitting your apps to the App Store after you create them using these tools. And when you go through to set up all of the accounts on these different tools, it will tell you that. So when you're ready to publish, you still need to have those Apple and Google developer accounts. For some tools, you'll find that you still need to submit the app yourself. So they'll actually give you a package that you could submit to the app stores yourself. But in some cases, they'll do everything for you, which is really nice. And in some cases, you might still need to hire a developer to do some of the more advanced features. And you might need to hire a programmer or developer to help you build the app. So once you get started, if you get stuck, then you might need to hire a programmer to help you finish up. So a quick warning before we get started and before we take a look at some of these tools, all of them are proprietary. So what that means is that someone owns the software that is being used to create these apps. That could mean that the app is not portable. So if you build it on one platform, you might not be able to move it to another. I do believe that at least one of the platforms I'm going to show you does allow you to export your app. But whether or not you can import it into another program is another story. I don't know that you can. So that's just something to be aware of. It means also that you'll own the content and the finished product, but you don't own the underlying code. And for most of what you're doing, probably doesn't matter. It probably really is not a problem that you don't own the underlying code. You can kind of think of it as something like if you're using Microsoft Word, Microsoft owns the proprietary software itself. And what they're doing is they're giving you a license to use it. You own any content that you develop in that Microsoft Word file. So if you write a book in Microsoft Word, which I don't recommend, that would not be fun. Write a book in software specifically for writing books. But if you wrote a book in Microsoft Word, you would actually own the content for the book, and you would own all the screenshots and everything that you developed for that book. But Microsoft is still going to own the underlying code of that Microsoft document, that Word document. So one thing I do want you to be aware of is if you are coming up with an awesome idea for an app, it's groundbreaking, nobody's ever done it before, then it might not be a bad idea to get a programmer to build it for you from scratch instead of using one of these proprietary tools, just to be on the safe side. If you have any concerns at all, speak with an attorney, and specifically look for an attorney that is well-versed in intellectual property rights. All right, so now before we begin, I actually want to just check and see if there are any questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. And I'm going to look at my other window real quick to see if there are any. All right, I'm not seeing any in there. So let me just check my emails real quick and see if anybody's asked one. All right, so it looks like we're good so far. So I'm going to continue on to these tools. All right, so now for the tools. So I'm going to show you 4 tools that I think are really good for beginners. So you don't have to have any development experience. You don't have to be a programmer to use any of these. One note, though, that none of these tools that I'm going to show you would be useful for building game-based apps. The reason for that is because I wanted to show you all beginner and non-developer tools. All of the tools that I know of for building game-based apps, I would say are probably a beginner could use them. I actually teach kids how to use them. They are relatively easy, but they do require you to basically become a developer. While they don't require you to code exactly, like you're not typing code out, they do require you to snap together blocks of code, and they're drag and drop code interfaces. So it is still coding as far as I'm concerned. So it may be a little bit harder for a non-developer to do. The reason that we're able to teach kids how to do it, kids are like sponges. So if you show them how to do it, it's super easy for them to do. I know adult brains have a little harder time learning new technology. So if you are interested in building a game-based app, we actually do teach classes for kids, and I would be happy to teach one for adults if you're interested in doing something like that. They're really fun to make. I've made a few for clients. We had a client that was trying to go from some Flash-based games, and they just wanted to turn that Flash-based game into an app, and it was really easy for me to do using one of these tools. So I could basically just use the assets that they had from the Flash-based game and use most of the same code in an app version of it. So it was really easy to do. So the 4 tools that I'm going to show you that are not game-based, these are for making just sort of general business, event, nonprofit, just kind of general information apps. Those tools are App Machine, Good Barber, SwiftTick, and Shout'em. I'm doing these in alphabetical order. This is absolutely, I'm sorry, SwiftTick I is in the wrong order because they changed their name. It used to be called Como. So it's in alphabetical order except for those last 2, which should be switched around. So, but they're not in order of preference. All right, so the first one is a tool called App Machine. Any prices that you see on the slideshow are, of course, subject to change. I have no control over them. By the way, I don't make any money off of you purchasing an account with these. So these are just straight links. They're not affiliate links or anything like that. So if I go to App Machine, which is our first tool, this is just going to take you straight to the App Machine website. So this is a really easy tool to use. Again, it's for non-developers. And so if I'm going to go in here, I'm going to start building. And I'm going to do my email address. Most of you already know this. It's okay. Actually, I already have an account on here. Oops. At least I thought I did. Oh, wait a second. I thought I had an account. Actually, I'm sorry. Before I show you the start building, I do want to take a look at the pricing. So again, I mentioned in the slideshow that it starts at, says $59 a month. That's because this price they're showing you here is for an annual plan. So if you're paying for a whole year in advance, you do save on it. If I switch it to the monthly plan, it's $59. And that's going to give you all of these options here. You get an app previewer, you get your live updates, you get blocks, and I'll show you what those are in just a minute, and analytics, push notifications, design options. If you go to their Pro plan, which is, if you do it monthly, is $89 a month, you get a few additional options. So iPad support is nice, custom web services. So I'm going to start building. Let's see. I'm going to create an account. Sorry, I left my mouse in the other room for this. I didn't want to have so much clicking. So I'm going to put in Chrissy. There's my email. I'm going to tell you my password. And I'm going to register. All right, it's already in use. I thought I had an account. There we go. All right, so you can see it'll actually walk you through building the app. So one of the nice things here is it will do a scan of your website. So I'm going to put in coderkidsclub.com. It's going to take a search of my website. It's going to see what kind of links it can find, any interesting links that it can find. So I'm going to let this run for just a minute. Oh, they won't import. They'll import your images, but they will import a lot of your content, which is nice. All right. There we go. Search completed. So I'm going to click next. Do I want to add Facebook to my app? Sure. Do I want to add Twitter? I don't have the Twitter, Coder Kids Club Twitter on my homepage, so it didn't find it. So I'm not going to add it right now. Let's see. I don't have RSS feed on my homepage. RSS is a really simple syndication. It's a way like a news reader. And it looks like it's getting, okay, there was getting stuck. Now, the next thing you can do is you can select a skin. They've got a lot of nice existing designs. So find one. It doesn't have to be exactly like what you want. Find something that looks pretty close to what you want. You can see they've got them categorized. You've got restaurant, musician, sort of none. Let's see. I think this first one is pretty close to what I want. So I'll select that. And my app is ready. So they do have a previewer that you can install on your phone or your tablet. So you would download that from the store, and there's a way for you to view it on your phone, which is really important. And we'll talk about that later on. So now I'm finished it, and I get a real-time preview of my app. So the way that they do this is very simple. You can see these look kind of like Lego bricks. They're blocks. So I can add new blocks to my app. So if I want users, if it's really important for users to be able to call me, I can add my phone number. I can put in my phone number. So we'll say 301-789-1815. That's the office phone number. Call. There we go. So I'm going to add that block. And you can see there is what it would look like if somebody was trying to call me. It's not available in the simulator. That's okay. So, and then you can see that call shows up on my home screen. Let me add another block. I'm going to add contact. And I want to contact Coder Kids Club, and I'll put in the address, Priest Bridge Drive, Suite 8, Crofton, Maryland 21114. Let's see if we can find it. There it is. There we are. There's a few other options in here, so I can put in the website. I can type. And see, you've got quite a few other options. So let's see, Coder Kids Club is I think Coder Kids Club is everything. Oops. The phone number in here. Add a description. I'm just going to put a smiley face in for right now. There we go. So I'm going to add the contact section. And I probably would add, if I was doing the contact, I probably would not need call, but maybe I would just leave it there. All right, so there is my website so far. I can actually change the order. I'm sorry, not my website, my app. I can change the order if I want. It's really not very easy to do because I don't have a mouse right now, but you can change the order of these. Oh, there we go. It's harder to do without a mouse. If you want, you can delete a section. So like if I just want to have contact instead of contact and call, I can right click on call and delete that section. There we go. So you can see it's relatively easy to add these blocks. I can add events. So this is pretty nice. I can add all of the events I have. This would be probably, for me, this would be really useful for the Coder Kids Club. So these are all of your basic blocks. There's also Plus and Pro. Pro requires you to have a Pro account, so they do cost a little bit more. One thing that's really, I think, very useful is they do have a loyalty card, which is really nice. So you can add a loyalty card that allows users to, so we'll say this is Coder Kids Club Rewards. And I have to go through and set things up on here. All right, so we'll save that. So I'm not going to go through and set all this up, but you can add a loyalty card. They also do have coupons under Plus. You can allow users to order food for delivery. There's all kinds of different blocks that you can use in here. So this would be worth exploring for you. So you can see this is relatively easy to do. Once you've got your design, once you've got all of your content set up, you can change the design if you want. So I can go through and change it. If I decide that I didn't like what I chose from the start, I can change it to a different design. So they've got all these different skins, and I can change it anytime I want. So if I want to change it to the mountains, it'll take away any existing styling. And now my app looks totally different with just the click of a couple of buttons. I can change the colors. on here. So the colors you can see are these weird sort of numbers and letters. Those are hexadecimal color values. If you click on this little color chip right here, you can change it to whatever color you want. Excuse me. You can also change the fonts, and you can also change the transition. So there's a lot of really nice features in here. You can download the PSD, the Photoshop document, if you really want to get very custom with your design. This does require you to have a copy of Photoshop. It's not a simple thing to just download and make a couple tweaks. You would have to use Photoshop to do that. And you'd have to know how to use Photoshop to do that. So another feature that they have in here that I wanted to mention is you can monetize. So that means that you can have ads on your site, or sorry, on your app. You would need to have an existing AdMob account for that. So you could go to AdMob, set up an account, and that'll show ads on your website. If this is sorry, not website, I keep saying website, but it's an app. So if this is an app for your company, I would not recommend putting ads on it. Now, if this was an app where the purpose of it was a service or something like that, then maybe. Like if you're creating an app that is like a local directory or something like that, and the way that you pay for it is through ads that get displayed on the app, then you might want to add this monetization. But otherwise, don't do that. Another thing I want to mention is if the app is for your business, so if the app is just sort of a way to market your business, don't charge for it. People won't download it, people won't buy it, most likely. A lot of apps these days, like if you're doing it as a productivity app or something like that, you probably aren't going to be able to use one of these tools. If you have a really exclusive directory, you might be able to charge for it, but I wouldn't recommend charging for this app if it's for your business, event, product, or something like that, because they're not going to pay for it and they're not going to download it. So you want to be able to get users that content without any barriers to it. Another option that they do have here is you can send push messages. Push messages come up as little sort of pop-ups on your screen. Users tend to get notifications when they have a push notification. So they can be annoying if you overuse it, so use it sparingly. When we develop clients, we make event apps for clients. So they're going to have, the users are going to install the app specifically for an event. Then we typically will send a push notification if a room number has changed or a speaker has changed or something like that. So for users to get information that's relevant to them. And we're not sending push notifications all the time. We're sending them when it's really important. We don't want to annoy the customers with our push notifications, but you do want to make sure that you have that ability. Excuse me. The promotion, they do have a few ways that you can promote your app. So you can create a website. It comes with it. So that is a nice feature that you have. So users can go to the website to learn about the app and then download it. And then of course you can just share straight from here. These are not part of the app, but they are added bonuses to help you get the word out about your app. Now, as far as publishing, when you're ready to publish your app after you've built it, you do have to fill in some information. I will go through and talk a little bit more about some of those things. But again, notice that you have to have your developer licenses. You need to have that Apple App Store and Google Play developer licenses. So just make sure that you have that information. All right, so that's App Machine. So the next one I want to show you is Good Barber. This one starts at $32 a month, but you do need to have the $96 a month option for iOS publishing. I would not recommend publishing an app unless you can do both Android and iOS. You really need to have both of those available for your users. So one of the nice features about this is that it does include a native app, which is what you're installing on your phone and your mobile device. But you also get something called a progressive web app. Basically, a progressive web app is a website that has app features in it. It's going to be viewed in the web browser on the device, but it can have some of the same features. It is nice because you might be able to even use that progressive web app as your website. So if you don't already have a website, Good Barber might be a good option for it because you get both the web app, which can be used as a website, and you get the native app. They do charge a fee for each iOS submission to the App Store. It's $290 for the initial submission for one app. And then they will include 3 updates to the app with that. So that's because it has to be done manually. So they do need to actually go through and look at the app to make sure that it meets the requirements for the Apple App Store. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, Apple is a little bit more picky than Google about what goes into the App Store. They will reject apps if they don't meet certain criteria. So they want to look at your app to make sure that it meets those criteria before submitting it to the App Store. They also do charge extra for having a loyalty program and coupon add-ons. So that is something to consider. I want to say it was like $80 a year. It wasn't a huge amount extra. And I would say that it looks really nice. So let's actually take a look at the Good Barber website. So I'm on the Progressive Web app. If you just wanted to have a native iOS and Android app, you can do that. But I would suggest going to the Progressive Web app for that. The pricing, we'll take a look at that. And scroll down. I like to show monthly. Sorry, let's look at native. And then pricing, sorry. So we're looking at native because you want to have not just the Progressive Web app, you want to have both. And the native iOS and Android version shows you have your native iOS and Android apps, and it gives you that Progressive Web app. So here we are. If I do apples to apples, so if I'm, again, going to the monthly, it would be, if you're doing it just, you're paying every month and not splitting it up over the year, you would be paying $115 a month. And you can see that includes the Progressive Web app, a native app for Android, a native app for iOS. Notice that this doesn't include a Windows app. Some of the tools that we're looking at don't include Windows. It's not as widely used as a mobile platform as Android and iOS. It does also allow you to have a personalized domain name. So that Progressive Web app could be your website. It also does include SSL, which is really nice. And you also get unlimited traffic and unlimited downloads. And you get your advanced add-ons. And I believe those advanced add-ons do include the loyalty program and the coupons. So I'm going to create my app. And it's going to ask me for a name. So I'll do Coder Kids Club. Notice it's making me do all lowercase. When I was testing this out, I already did Coder Kids Club. So we'll say Coder Kids Club 2. Let's see, what business am I in? Say it's a nonprofit. I'm doing this little plus. This is we use Google for our email. If you can add plus and then anything after that, and it'll just create like a new sort of throwaway email. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to create my app. Magical stuff is happening. And now my app is ready. So one of the nice features, I do like Good Barber. They give you some nice, a wizard to create your app, which is really nice. So I'm going to, in the wizard, I'm going to customize my design. So they don't give you choices of skins. They let you choose a color scheme and your typography. So if you wanted to change your color scheme, so if I wanted to make mine, let's say Night Drive, you can see the colors show up there. And I can change my main font. And you can see that's affecting this nice preview. And they really make that preview sort of front and center. You can change the different fonts for the different headings. And so there's a lot of options here. Excuse me. All right. So my style is good. I'm going to apply my changes. I can customize the header. So I can change, let me scroll back up a little tiny bit here so you can see everything. I can change the icon. Let's see, I'll make it a grid, and that changes this icon over here. I can change the color. So if I wanted it to be like purple. There we go. I can customize it. I can upload an image for my logo instead of having it say Coder Kids Club 2. And again, I can change the font. I can change colors. I can change all kinds of stuff. All right, so now I'm going to go to the next thing. So it's going to save that. This is my menu. And it gives me a bunch of default content. So I've got my home screen, blog, calendar, add your event. So this is a way for users to add the event, community, and equipment. So if there was one that I wanted, let's say that I wanted to delete equipment, I can just move my mouse over it and hit the trash can icon. And it's going to say, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. I'm going to delete it. And that gets rid of it from the menu. So when I look at the menu, I go to the menu, you can see equipment is now gone. Now, some of these, when I'm looking at this content, some of them, when I click on them, it gives me some configuration options. So the home screen is going to show me the blog and my news. Those are the sections that I get on there. And I think it shows me, all right, again, don't have the mouse. There's my calendar. I think that's it. So I can configure it. There's not really much I can do with the content for home, but I will show you how to change the actual content on home. So if I wanted to change my blog, now I can change the content. So you can see here I've got Clean Our Shores. And this is actually a blog post that I've got in my content management system for my app. So I can go through and I can change the title. So if I wanted to change that to an exclamation, when I publish this, it does get published to the app. So if I go back and we look at the blog, you can see there's my exclamation. So same thing for the content on calendar. When I look at the calendar section, the calendar here, you can see there's my content. There are all of the items on my calendar. So you could go through and edit them, delete them, do whatever you need to them. You can also change the way that they appear. So you do have quite a few options here. All right, so let's say that I've gone through and I've edited, I've organized my content, and I want to add a section. So let's say I want to add my loyalty section or something. You do have a bunch of options here. I'm going to load some more. You can have up to 120 sections. It's a lot. But let's say that I don't want to have one of these sections. I want to add an add-on. I can add loyalty card. So $8 a month. And I think it's included in, if you get that pro plan, I believe that it is included. I'm not positive, but I think it is. So I can add it and test it out. I haven't paid for an account, so I'm just going to add it. Oh, let me test it for free. Sorry, that's the option for free. Hit the wrong button. All right. So you've got a few settings here. You can use different options for how it looks for your card. Let's see. You can determine how the validation happens, which is really nice. So you can have it so it's done with, it could be done with a QR code. You could do a manual check-in as long as the users are within a certain latitude or longitude, which is really nice. So if users are physically at your location, you can do that. The QR code might be a little easier. Users actually have to go into your store and scan the QR code to check in, which is nice. So we're just going to use that as the option. So QR is the option. And then we can say, what did they get? So once they fill up their loyalty card, what do they get? You can set it up to be whatever you want. All right, so I've set up my loyalty program now. And I'm going to go back to my builder. Go to my content. And there's my loyalty card. All right. So I've got, and oops, I think I can put it up in my main nav. I'm not sure I'll be able to do it without my mouse. Sorry. It's a little harder to do this without a mouse. I'm pretty sure you can put it into the main nav without the mouse, though. So let's say I'm going to go back to the wizard here. I've got everything selected. Let's say I've got everything done. I've made my menu. They're going to also want me to create icons. They will create icons sort of for you. So you can, it's really limited though. So I can say I want my icon to look like this, TKC. I can change the color of the background, make it purple, make it a gradient. You can do all kinds of stuff. So this is going to be the icon that is installed on the phone. There we go. If you want to create your own custom icon, you can create it as a JPEG, a PNG, and then upload it if you want. That's usually what we do for our customers. The other thing that they're going to require you to do is create a launch screen. This is something that's, again, uploaded as part of your app submission. So it's going to be a graphic that's going to be on your launch screen. So let's say that we've created that. And then finally, you can publish your app. You should test it. But if you are ready to publish your app, there are a few additional things that we'll talk about in a few minutes that you need to do before you're ready to publish it. So that is the basics of Good Barber. All right, so our next one is SwiftTick. It's another one that's pretty easy to get started with. So first we'll take a look at the pricing. And again, we'll try to do our monthly comparison. So $57 a month, not too bad, relatively easy to use. This was another one I really like. So one of the things I like about SwiftTick is that you can actually create the app without entering your email address, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to call this Coder Kids. We'll go next. All right, so let me select the Facebook page, or if I didn't have a Facebook page, I could go to the website and hit next. And this is kind of like that first one that we looked at. Excuse me, App Machine, where it actually scans. In this case, it's scanning the Facebook page, and it's collecting information. It's pulling information straight from my Facebook page. So now I can build my awesome app. And you can see it automatically added. Well, I'm just going to go through this little tour real quick. It's going to tell me some more features I can add. There's my existing app. All right. So if I go, this is one of the things I really liked about this. If I go to my events, it actually pulls all of the events that were on my Facebook page, which I think is really, really useful. If I go to contact us, when I attempt to call, it would actually, well, if it was actually on a phone, it would try to call my phone, or it would try to call the phone number. And the About Us is also getting pulled from the Facebook page. Now, of course, you can go through and customize each of these sections. So after it's pulled that About Us, if you need to change it, you can edit it. So you can go through and you can change what's on here. So if I didn't want that image to show up at the top, I could change it. For Contact Us, I can change the image that appears. For the map, I can change the address. So when I move, if I move again, I can change that as well. It does automatically link to Facebook. So you can see there's my face. It's going to give you the Facebook posts, most recent Facebook posts. That's really nice. Photos, it's going to automatically pull photos for me from my Facebook account. And then you can add more blocks if you need to. So we have spoken a few times about those loyalty. You want to give. This is a really easy value add that you can give your customers a reason to install and keep your app. I know that after I've built up a few loyalty points with an app, I don't necessarily want to uninstall the app. I want to keep the app and use it. So I'm less likely to uninstall it. So you could add your loyalty card. So it's telling me, oops, because I have to actually create the account or create the card. I'm just putting in some just sort of demo information here. All right. Let's refresh. Oh. Didn't fill everything in that I needed. We'll update that, and there is my loyalty card. Yay! So when I'm ready to enter the information, the user can just tap on it, and then you, as the store owner, would have to enter the code to stamp the card. So it makes it relatively easy. You can also offer coupons, scratch cards. You can actually use your store. You can link to your store. If you have an existing Shopify or WooCommerce, WooCommerce is the sort of a pretty standard WordPress e-commerce system. So if you have that set up already, or Como, you can integrate with those already. By the way, this used to be called Como, was the name of the app builder. So I think that's why they still have the store by Como here. So I'm not going to add that right now, but let's say that I had that, I could add it relatively easily. You can see there's a few other things like you've got for engagement. You can add your Instagram feed. You can add videos. You can add all kinds of cool stuff. You can add a form if you want users to be able to contact you or add themselves to your mailing list. So lots of really nice features here. You can also modify the appearance. So you do that under Style and Navigation. They have some themes here that you can select from. So let's say that I wanted to have something like this. You can change how the menu looks, the navigation. So you can have everything down at the bottom. You can have it appear on the left side. So you've got a few options. You can change your color scheme and customize them a little bit more if you need to. So if you want to change, select a scheme and then decide you want to customize the individual colors, you can. You can also add a background. So I'll just put this background image here. Let me close the menu. It doesn't really go with my colors, but I could also, if I wanted to, I can edit the backgrounds. So you've got a few options. I like that brick. There we go. Got quite a few. This is where, so you might have noticed that it says Untitled App at the top of my app, which isn't really that professional. So you can change it. If I wanted to change this to Coder Kids Club. Yeah. And I'll set the app name to Coder Kids Club. You can see that changes it there. And you can change the background of the header. Let's say I want to make it orange. Sort of go better with my colors. Oops, there we go. Now another feature they have here, and this is actually, I didn't really point this out, but I do want to mention it. You want to make sure that the preview looks good, not just on your smartphones, but also on tablets. So just something to keep in mind there. All right, so when you're done with your editing, I'm going to save that. They do have analytics for you. Most of these do have some kind of analytics, so you can see how users are using your app. Oops, I don't want to manage it. Sorry, I hit the wrong one. Their to market does require you to log in. It does require you to create an account. But this would allow you, when you do the to market, it allows you to enter your Google Play and your Apple developer account information and some additional stuff that needs to be added to publish the app. So that is SwiftTick. And the last one I'm going to show you is Shoutem. It's another nice one. I'm only showing you nice ones. So just as we did with the other ones, we're going to look at the pricing first. You can see they do have a basic account that's $19.90 a month, but it's just for an HTML5 app, basically a progressive web app. That's nice, but not super useful for what we're trying to do here. So you want to make sure that you have your Android and iPhone, your iOS and Android. This gives you HTML5. It also gives you the push notifications. So I'm going to stick with the $49 a month. That's if you do it for a year. If you're doing it monthly, it's $58.90 a month. Excuse me. So I'm going to try it now. I'm going to create my app. This is another one where I don't have to enter my information to create the app initially. I don't have to enter my email address or anything. I'm going to do an event app this time. And they let you choose a preset style. Actually, I'm going to use this one. And they also let you choose what you want your navigation to look like initially. So let's see, I'll go with kind of like that. And you can change it later. It's going to give you some default content. It doesn't pull the content from your website automatically. It gives you default content to use. Oh, and I'm sorry, I lied. They do require you to create an account to actually play with it. There we go. All right, so it takes a minute to generate an app for me in this lovely builder. So as I mentioned earlier, you can change your layout at any time. And you get this preview just like you did with the other builders. So it takes a minute sometimes. I'm going to go back to drawer. While it's doing that, I'm going to go into just show you, as you already saw in all of the other back ends, the back offices, the back ends. I'm back in right now in Good Barber, and you can see you've got your navigation, you've got your analytics are part of the account. So same thing that we saw with SwiftTick. You also have analytics for Shoutem. So it does require you to have a plan. I'm in the basic plan right now, the free demo plan. So it's not going to be enabled in here, but that is something that you can see. All right, so back to screens to play around with this. So you can see it does give me some default content. So I've got my program, tickets, photos, and so on. Excuse me. I can add more screens. So you can see they've got some built-in screens here. Sort of pre-configured, a bunch of them. We've seen a lot of these with some of the other ones. Again, I do want to point out that they do have a loyalty system. They also integrate specifically with Shopify. If you remember from the last one we looked at, SwiftTick, it integrated with several other e-commerce systems. In the case of Shoutem, they specifically integrate with Shopify. So if you've already got a Shopify site, then you're good to go. If you don't, you might want to consider it, but If you don't want to integrate your e-commerce onto your app, you don't have to. So I'm going to create a new loyalty card just because I've shown this with all of the apps, the app builders. This one's, I think, a little bit harder to set up. Let's see. So I have to create an item. Yeah, it's a little bit harder to set up. So I don't know that I'll go through and set it all up because we don't have as much time left out here. But you can create a punch card with this. Let me just preview it and see if it works. I'm not sure why it's timing out. Yeah, I've run into this problem a few times with Shadow, but it might just be my Wi-Fi. Oh, there it goes. Trying to. Okay, I want to see my, let's see, preview. Come on. Look at my punch card. All right, so this one does require you to log in or register to use your punch card. I don't think it required that for any of the other ones. I would caution on this. Having that information is useful, of course, but your users might be less likely to use it if they have to register to use it. So just something to keep in mind. You want them to come in. You don't want to have a barrier to use of any of the features. If you're putting a community or something like that in, absolutely, you're going to need to have their email address, their username and everything like that, but just something to keep in mind. All right, so when you are ready to, you can change the style. So they do have these pre-built themes. You can change it to a different theme if you wish, and it will apply that theme to the look of your website, or sorry, your app. I keep saying website, I gotta stop that. You can customize the colors and the fonts for the theme if you wish. They've got a lot of customization here that you can do. Relatively easy back end here. Lots of other things you can add. There is some integration with the content management system, CMS's content management system. There are extensions. So there's a lot you can do with this. You can also customize your launch screen and your app icons. If you upload, you can upload one if you create it. I'm going to change my icon to the smiley face. Oh, never mind. So let's say that we're done, we're ready to go. Obviously we're not, but let's say that we are. And I want to publish this. They will require you to pick a plan and pay for it before you can publish it. This is true for all of them. And then you'll also, after that, you'll need to enter your Apple and Google developer account information. All right, so I just showed you 4 tools, just really quick walkthroughs. You can pick one. So next steps, pick one after trying them. Don't rely on just my walkthrough because it's just a walkthrough. I have looked at each of these tools before. I have a personal favorite. I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't want to bias you. I want you to take your requirements. I want you to look at all of the features that each of those tools offers. And I want you to try each of them for an hour, maybe 2 hours, and see which one is going to work the best for you. Your needs and your requirements are going to be different than mine. So I come at this from a developer's perspective and not a user's perspective. So my perspective is very different from what yours might be. Look at all of the features of each of them. Your decision on which tool you use might be determined by it having a specific feature and then having that feature work the way that works for your company. So, for example, if you need to have integration with WooCommerce, then SwiftTick, which I believe had that integration with it, that might be the tool that you have to use specifically for that purpose. If it has another feature that's very important for your business, then that just might be the tool that you have to use. So definitely try each of those 4 tools and search for more. There are other ones out there. So the 4 that I've shown you are 4 that I know of. There are 4 that I have used, not necessarily for clients, but 4 that I have used for testing purposes and evaluation purposes for clients. But I haven't necessarily used them to create client apps. There are a couple that I have used for client apps. So the next step would be to select your favorite tool and build your app. You can see on this screen, it does say plan to spend at least 8 hours building your app. At least 8 hours. When I do an app for a client, I usually budget at least 16 hours. Sometimes it's a lot more. Sometimes it's a little bit less. Sometimes it ends up being less than 16 hours, but that's sort of my average for a relatively simple content-based app for a client. Now, if I'm doing an event app for a client where we have to add things like abstract submissions, abstract searching, we do some apps where users are able to submit scores for their judging abstracts at a conference. That takes a lot longer than the 16 hours. That's going to take 40, 60, 80 plus hours. It really depends on what we're doing. And for something like that, I'm probably not using one of these tools. I'm using something else. I'm using a different tool that we use as developers here. After you've picked that tool, make sure you read the documentation on it, watch the tutorials. There's tons of them. If there's one in particular, I might do a more in-depth look at some of these tools. I'll probably pick my favorite one, the one that I keep saying is my favorite, but I won't tell you which one. So I'll probably pick that one and do a more in-depth walkthrough of that. That's maybe a 90-minute walkthrough of just that one tool. If you get stuck, ask the provider for help. I would love to help you, but I have to charge you for that. So you're already paying these providers for these tools, so ask them for help. That's what they're there for. They will help you. They will help you get unstuck. If they can't help you, then you might have selected the wrong tool. So one thing that you might want to try to do is test and see, like as you're getting started, is ask for help and see what that support looks like. Now, a few tips while you're building your app: keep it clean. Don't put too much stuff on there. Don't try to throw 50 icons on your home screen. For your app, users are not going to look at all 50 of those things, and they're just going to get confused and frustrated and lost. So don't put too much stuff into your app. Another thing that's really important, I see a lot of apps that are out there that consist primarily of links to the website for the company. That's really not a good reason to build an app. If the only reason you're building the app is for users to be able to get to the content on your website, they're going to probably bypass the app and just go straight to your website. Remember, if users have no reason to go to the app other than not remembering the URL, it's really not a good reason to have an app. So make sure your content is loading in the app and not from the website. If you do need to load content from your website into the app, make sure that the website, that the web page that it's loading from is designed specifically for that purpose. Because otherwise the users might get stuck. They might not be able to navigate if it's not an app optimized screen in your website. So they're going to get stuck, frustrated, annoyed, and they might uninstall your app because of it. And then the other thing, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is be careful about adding features that require a user to log in. Users are getting a little bit tighter with their information, not as likely to share it. So just be aware that you might not get a user to install your app, or they might install it and then they uninstall it because they don't want to create another account to use your app. So the next step would be you need to create your developer accounts. And I'll actually open up the pages for these. So you need to create your account for the Apple Developer Program. You can just enroll when you do that. Enroll as an organization. You do need a Dun & Bradstreet number, so just a DUNS number. You do need that. You need to be a legal entity if you're enrolling as an organization. And oops, here's the Google. Sorry, hit the wrong part of the screen. So if you want to enroll for Google, you need to have a Google account to do that. So again, that's the $25 one time, and Apple is the $99 a year. Next thing, you need to test your app. So as you saw, all of the tools had some really nice previews that were browser-based, and that's great. That's really nice. Just don't rely 100% on that, because you're not going to get the most accurate test results with that. It might load nicely. It might look really good. It might be nice and work, but it's not a good true test of the app on a device. So you want to make sure that you are packaging the app and installing it on devices. If you don't have access to devices, a whole bunch of devices, there is a service called Browser Stack App Live. We use this to do some testing, and it'll actually install the app on some virtual and real Android devices. So it actually has a whole collection of Android and iOS devices, and you can install it on all of those devices and test it on there. That's a little bit better representation of it. If something doesn't work, if the app crashes or anything like that when you're doing your testing, contact support for your app platform provider, then they should fix it. There's no reason that your app should be crashing. I will tell you, I have apps that crash. I uninstall those apps because it's really annoying that they crash, and it's not a good user experience. So if your app is crashing, there's a really good chance that users are going to uninstall it and not reinstall it later on after you fix it. So make sure you have done this testing in a variety of devices. So the next thing you would do is you need to publish your app. So when you're ready to publish your app, you saw all of those tools do have the option. They will help you with the publishing of the app. Some of them do more than others. They will walk you through the process, though. You will need to collect some information. So before you actually submit the app to the Apple or Google Store, when you create the packages for it, which is something that these platforms will do for you in many cases, you are going to have to enter some information. You're going to need a title, description, short description. You're going to need to know what categories, keywords, what rating, content rating you have, what's the email address for support. So if somebody gets stuck, who can they contact? Phone numbers, URLs for privacy and marketing. As you saw in some of the tools, you will also have to create an icon and a splash screen. And in some cases, you might even have to create screenshots. The screenshots are required by the app stores. Some of the tools that I've shown you will automatically generate those screenshots for you, so you don't have to do it for yourself. But you might have to do the screenshots yourself, and you can get those when you're testing them on those multitude of devices that you're going to test on. So after that, when you've submitted them to the App Store and you publish them, I didn't put this in a slide, but I will tell you, Google usually does it within a few hours. They're very quick to publish those apps. Apple, on the other hand, I usually say 24, 48 hours. It's usually around that range. I have had an app take up to a week, but it was when I submitted it like during the holidays, and so it took a little bit longer for somebody to actually look at it. Apple does look at the app before they publish it in their store. So a human being, they do some automated testing and automated checking, but I believe they still have a human being actually looking at the app to make sure that it meets their standards and all of their requirements before they publish it to the App Store. So just make sure that you've give them a little bit of time to publish it, and make sure that you're allocating enough time for that before, if you're trying to get it ready for an event, make sure that you're keeping that in mind. So after that, make sure you publicize your app, let your users know, put signs up in the store with a QR code to download it. Send an email to all your users, put it on your social media, share this with your customers. If you remember those value-added features that we talked about earlier that you've added to your app, your customers should be thrilled that you've added them, and they should be coming in to your store, your event, or anything when you've added those features to the app, and they should be excited. Don't just publish it and walk away. You do need to care for and update this app from time to time, because otherwise users will install it and then they'll never look at it again. So make sure that you are updating the app frequently as you can. My rule of thumb is at least once a month if it's for an ongoing business app. If it's for an event app, you're only going to be updating it pretty much right before, during, and right after the event. You don't need to necessarily keep that updated all the time. But for other apps that are for ongoing business purposes, you do want to make sure that you are updating them on an ongoing basis. So if you have a schedule for adding blog posts or your social media content, add your app updates to that schedule as well. You also want to check your statistics. So most of those tools, actually all of the tools that I showed you, do have analytics. Check them. Make sure that users are using the app and which users are using the app. Why? Maybe if you're only getting iOS users, maybe the Android version of the app is crashing. So check out why users are using, and make sure that they are actually using it. And again, last reminder, update, don't let the app stagnate. All right, so that's the bulk of the content. I'm just going to look real quick and see if I got any questions. Give me 1 second. Don't see any. All right. Okay, sorry about that. So I don't see any questions. If you do have questions later on, you can email me. And before I let you go, because I've got a few minutes, I do want to mention a couple of other tools. I said I would. So if you are considering building an app for a game and you don't want to actually learn any of those languages that I mentioned, this is one of the tools. It's called Stencil. This is a tool that we use with the kids when we do app development with kids, or sorry, not app development, game development with kids. This is a really easy to use tool. It's really fun, and they've got a bunch of games, pre-built games that you can just change the graphics in. But you can see it says coding, no coding required. This is coding. You basically need to learn the basics of programming to do this. So you need to know what a loop is, what a logic, a condition, variable, and stuff like that. You do need to know some basic underlying programming concepts. But this is one of the tools. I will warn you, publishing these is not nearly as easy as using one of those platforms. You have to do a lot of the heavy lifting yourself. You've got to do a lot of stuff on the computer. You need to have an Apple computer to publish to iOS if you're using something like this. Another one that we've used is called Game Salad. So we've Game Salad, and again, this is another one that we have taught kids. You can see that they've got a lot of stuff for educators specifically, but it's relatively easy to use, and kids can learn it. But again, publishing it is a little bit harder to do. Now, if you want to do a business app and you want to maybe own the content a little bit more, we've done that with a tool called AppPresser. So if you already have a WordPress website, and if you look on my YouTube channel, you'll see a couple of videos for this. But we do a lot of websites in WordPress. Pretty much all of the websites that we build are in WordPress. And when they are, when clients need an app to go with it, we'll use a tool like AppPresser. Excuse me. We'll use a tool like AppPresser to extend that WordPress website and reuse the content within the context of an app. So this is an option that you have. There are other tools out there for creating WordPress-based apps, but this is just one that we use. It's one that we've used for several of our client websites. So that's pretty much it. Again, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. If you have questions, for those of you that did pre-register for the class, I will send a follow-up email. Just let me know if you have any questions. If you want, you can comment on the video on YouTube if you'd like, or you can send me an email with your questions. And I will try to follow up with this with another workshop down the road, either something a little bit more in depth on a couple of these tools, at least one of them, I think, that would be pretty useful for people. And again, if you're interested in doing like a game-based app, I can always do a class on that. So thanks again, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful day.